Hello and welcome to episode 182 of the Chills Will podcast. It's a pleasure today to be joined by Talia Lakshmi Kolluri. A bit about Talia. Talia Lakshmi Kolluri is a mixed South Asian American writer from Northern California. Her debut collection of short stories, What We Fed to the Manticore from Tin House 2022, is a finalist for the 2023 Carol Shields Prize for Fiction, which she was talking about, which was held last week, and was longlisted for the 2023 Andrew Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, the 2023 Aspen Words Literary Prize, and the 2023 Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize for Debut Short Story Collection, and was selected as the 2023 ALA RUSA Notable Book. It's available now wherever books are sold. Her short fiction has been published in the Minnesota Review, Ecotone, Southern Humanities Review, The Common, One Story, Orion, Five Dials, and the Adroit Journal. A lifelong Californian, Talia lives in the Central Valley with her husband, a teacher and printmaker, and a very skittish cat named Fig. Good evening. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you including my cat in the bio. That's such a key factor.
So I'm looking at the bottom, like, okay, do you live in the Central Valley and then from Northern California? So we talking like the Bay Area? Did you grow up in like the Bay Area?
Yeah. I grew up in the Bay Area. Technically, we were in the city boundaries of the city of San Jose, but I was actually really in
Oh,
Campbell, which is
oh my gosh.
South Bay right here, and I live in Fresno now, which is
Okay.
a wonderful community.
Awesome. I know I very much know Campbell and San Jose, and awesome.
Yeah.
But an official, welcome. It's a pleasure to talk to you. I'm really excited to talk with you.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited to be here. I'm a huge fan of the podcast, and so I'm this is a very exciting thing for me too.
Appreciate that. Tell me again, refresh my memory, please. Oh, it's okay. So it's through Tin House, and you're saying obviously you can buy wherever books are sold. Do you have a favorite bookstore or bookstores like you want to direct people to?
Yeah, it kind of depends on where you're at. If you have a local independent bookstore available to you, then by all means, please do support your local indies. I don't have a large indie bookstore scene where I live, so
Hmm.
Barnes and Noble is a great place to buy your
There you
books
go.
too. If you're shopping online, I love it when folks choose bookshop.org, and then you can select an indie bookstore to send your support to. And please read it from your public library. I'm a huge fan and supporter
Yes.
of public libraries, and it's available on the Libby app for libraries,
Mm,
and you can also get audiobooks through Libby.
nice.
And lots of libraries have this particular book. So, and if they don't have it, you can request that your library order it. So
There
please
you
do.
go. Awesome. I'd love to, talk about the beginnings, your early relationship with the written word, language, reading. Were you the type to have books all over the place? You talking about the library? I mean, were you like a bookworm? Kind of how did you grow up what was the relationship with the written word in your house and just in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a long time passionate, dedicated reader. And the thing is that literacy is like such a gift. Having the ability to read, I think, is such a gift, and I love having that ability. And I
Mhm.
remember as a very small child just desperately wanting to read. Like, I wanted to read as early as possible. I just wanted to know what was in books.
Hmm.
Um and I actually remember the first time I read a book and I recognized a word and then the significance of the word.
Hmm.
And it was like this exciting moment for me. And probably ever since then I'm just been really dedicated to living inside books. When I was a kid, there was a public library across the street from my school, and I would go there after school,
Okay.
and I would spend, just hours and hours there as a child, to do my homework, and then I'd have this uninhibited time to just kind of wander through the library, and I read everything in like the kids section. And then when I worked my way through that, I just started wandering and see what else is out there. And so I found Ray Bradbury and
Hmm.
history books and things on politics. And so I generally was allowed to read without any restriction. And that was also such a beautiful way to experience a reading life, because it just felt like a ton of opportunities, and I
Mhm.
I felt liberated to choose what I wanted to read. So it's been a books have been consistent companions my whole life.
Yes. Those are the days, right? Those are the days you
Right.
go after school and you go to the sections, and once you've read all those books in the section, you move on.
Yeah.
I mean, were you reading like the Communist Manifesto at like age 10 or what?
Funny you should mention that. I actually did find a copy of the Communist Manifesto in fifth grade. And I mean, at that age, I probably didn't really fully
Yeah.
understand what it was saying, but it was interesting, right? Just let the words in. And I have to credit the librarians at it was the Saratoga Public Library
Uh-huh.
in Saratoga, California, that I have to credit them with being one extraordinarily tolerant. Because I spent a lot of time there, and a lot of the kids from my school did, and they're extraordinarily tolerant, and they never got in my way.
Mm.
They never stopped me from looking at anything, and that really nurtured in me sort of a lifelong curiosity. And I think that curiosity and joy in reading are kind of the like key roots to writing.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. I don't know what to say. I think in some ways the curiosity has been heightened by all the different tools we have. I don't want to be like the old man yelling at the cloud, but just the idea of like curiosity that maybe has been diminished in so many ways. But that's a discussion for a different day, right?
Sure. It's a
I
whole
want
other podcast.
I want to know what the word was. What was the word that the significance? You're
Yeah,
like,
it was
you remember?
baby. So it was a Richard Scarry's
Oh yeah.
the books, all these little animals like doing things. And it was some sort of story about mice. And the word was offset in the text, but it was in some sort of color, and it was outlined. In my memory, it was a yellow lettering outlined in black. I went and I found the book recently at my sister's house,
Whoa.
and it's a different color, and I don't remember what color it is,
Um,
but it's a word in color, and it was outlined in black, so it was very visually offset. And I remember looking at it and knowing what it meant. It was referring to like a
uh,
baby mouse, like a anthropomorphized baby mouse, and I just
um,
felt like, oh, I know what this is.
yeah.
And it was
Whoa.
thrilling.
What a memory. How cool is
It's
that?
so thrilling.
I don't, my arms aren't that long. I have some a little bit outside of my reach from my kids. The classic one, I forget the name, but the one that has all the cars, the Richard Scarry. You
Yeah,
know what
yeah,
I'm talking about?
yeah. Yeah, the like something about towns, and I
I
forget what it
think
is, but it was
so,
something like
right?
that. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like a cheese car and a pickle
Yes,
car,
cheese.
right?
Love the
Um,
cheese car.
so I wonder about like I mean, have you always been an animal lover? Are you an animal lover? Just kind of assume through the book, but I mean,
I mean,
excuse
that's
me.
a fair it's a fair assumption. I am, so yes, I am an animal lover, and I think it's probably a little bit more than that. I don't know what your childhood was like, but I
Mm,
played a lot of make believe,
sure.
and spent at least half of my make believe time pretending to be an animal. And a part of that is I just have always wanted to know, what is it like? What is it like to be a bird? How does it
Mm,
feel to fly?
mm,
How does it feel to swim like a dolphin? All of those experiential things about animals feel inaccessible to me, and have always felt inaccessible, and yet I have never stopped trying to make
mm,
them accessible for myself.
right.
So it's partly just a love and appreciation for the natural world and for animals, but also a deep, insatiable
Mm.
desire to share their experience. And as an adult, I can use the powers of the internet to bring me all of the layperson science I want, to have a
Right.
better understanding of what is that, how do the mechanics of their bodies work, how can I telegraph my own mind into their lives.
Yeah.
So it's those similar, related but not identical
Huh.
things.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I wonder as you got older, high school into college, I wonder like, did you see yourself the big reader, all the different things that make us up, culture and animal lover and book lover and, all those type of things. Did you feel like you saw yourself in what you're reading? And also who were those readers and excuse me, who were those writers and those books and those texts that really inspired you as you got older?
Oh gosh, that's a great question. I will say that I never really saw my exact experience reflected in literature, and particularly literature based in the United States, American literature. I think that conversations about representation in books is sort of an ongoing conversation. And I come from a mixed background. My dad's side of the family is from South India. My mom's side of the family is American of like Eastern and Western European heritage. So like English and Slovak on my mom's side. So
Okay.
so I grew up in a like ethnically, racially, culturally mixed household, which was not reflected in the literature that was made available to me. So no, I didn't see myself in books that I read. I think what that did, though, is it meant that pretty much every single book I read as a kid was one in which I had to use a leap of imagination to kind of experience other lives that were never going to belong to me exactly, and imagine myself inside those lives, and to also sort of sometimes consciously, sometimes subconsciously seek similarities that could make them relatable to me. I think that it made me like from an artistic standpoint, kind of an observer, because I'm watching lives that don't reflect my own play out. And also kind of like, being a mixed person means that I also sometimes just feel like an observer in either of my cultures anyway, because I'm never fully inside anything, which means I can participate in both an inside and outside way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I think that means that I was drawn to really like broad, like a broad scope of literature. I read a lot of like fantasy, and I read a lot of animal books. Like Watership Down is probably one of the most inspiring books to me, because again, it's a life outside my own. I am not a rabbit, but I connected so much to those things. So books like Watership Down or Beverly Cleary. I was a little kid, I loved Beverly Cleary's books. Judy Blume is a gold standard for any adolescent girl. Actually, I read Judy Blume probably from like 8 to 16. Lois Lowry, all the classic wonderful writers for young people. There's a book that I absolutely loved called Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. I was just obsessed with. That's a gorgeous
Mildred Taylor.
Yes, Mildred Taylor's books. Gorgeous. I read that whole series. Madeline L'Engle, all of those wonderful books that I think I found things that I could understand as belonging to me, even if I wasn't directly reflected in the literature. And I think that as an adult, what that has meant for me is that I prefer to read really broadly. I love, in the past 5 or 6 years, I've been deliberately choosing literature and translation. Because I think there's a lot of stuff out there that for a long time wasn't necessarily available to English language readers. And so I'm looking for things that are kind of outside my experience. I'm always actually trying, honestly, I'm always trying to find something outside my own experience.
Have you, through the literary circles, or previously, do you know any translators? Are you in conversation with translators just about, how interesting their job is and just kind of what they bring to the table?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't know any translators very well. Jenny Bott is a wonderful champion of literature that's translated.
BHATT, right?
Yes. And I know her through like she did a profile for my book, which was wonderful, and I know her through social media, and I admire her both her mission and her work quite a lot. She is a translator, but I have not talked to her about her translation experience, and I am very interested in that work, in the sense that I think that it's also creative, because you're taking something made by someone, and then you're shaping something new that effectively conveys the spirit of their work, but it's still something new.
Oh man, so as far as the writing side of it, what flipped the switch for you? What was the link between the huge reader as a kid and you now? Where were some of those links about like, whoa, I can do this, I can write a story like Lois Lowry, or totally opposite of Lois Lowry, and people like it, and nobody likes writing, right? Nobody likes it.
I do though.
You do?
I
Nice.
do.
I'm of course kind of kidding. But so yeah, I mean, what made you say like, oh man, I like this and I can do this well?
I think that well, I'm gonna take the second part of your question first, which is that I never actually am satisfied with what I've written. Um, I described it to someone once in an interview as it's sort of like in my mind, I imagine a symphony played by a full orchestra. And the first draft is sort of like that song rendered on a kazoo. And I'm always trying to move from the kazoo to the symphony, and I never reach it. And so I don't know. I don't have an objective view of my own work. So I don't know that I can
Sure.
say for sure that, yes, I know that I am like satisfied with this and it's getting there, but I try to get as close of an approximation as possible. But, I think that writing for me is the natural extension of that make-believe.
Mm.
And I started writing really young as a kid, all the time. And it really just felt like a very intuitive continuation of that same sort of play. I did take some time off. As like in college, and I in graduate school. I don't have an MFA, but I did go to law school. So in law school, which is a very depressing experience, that is when I started writing creatively again. I was get out of my head. And what I did is I ended up writing I was on the sort of script writing team for our law school musical. So that kind of reignited.
Whoa. There's a law school musical?
There's a law school musical. Yeah.
Okay.
I was a founding. So I will mention this because we recently, it was the 20th anniversary of our first performance. I was a founding member of the University of Minnesota Law School's Theater of the Relatively Talentless, which the acronym is
what's the
TORT.
Acronym? I was going to say, what's the acronym?
TORT.
Wow.
And it was just this like wonderful experience of like people who wanted to do something creative. And it was just ad hoc and like all students just for like pure fun. And it was like this really transformative experience for me. And it reignited my love for writing. So I spent maybe 4 years in college, not really writing creatively at all.
Yeah. And
this like sort of like humorous parody based creative practice kind of got me thinking creatively again. And then when I finished law school, then I started taking my creative writing more seriously. And again, like as an adult, I was like, okay, I'm gonna write a bunch of really horrible short fiction. It's gonna just be like terrible, but like you have to get the terrible stuff out first. And so I spent years writing really awful, sad, like stories all populated by humans, which I am not good at that. Yeah.
I'm sure there's not a yes or no to this, but I mean, it was all worth it though, right?
Absolutely.
What we fed to the Manticore is the collection. You heard all of the nominations, all of the prizes, all of the acclaim. I had heard all of the great things. For some reason, I was thinking the Manticore was like a dolphin type of thing. And of course, thanks to Wikipedia and looking at the myth again, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. But anyways, so I'd heard all the great things, and it was even better than I thought it would be.
Oh, thank you so much.
9 stories.
Yeah, there's
9 stories, and just like, I don't know, to me, it's like one of one. It's so distinctive, so original. Does the book stand on others' shoulders? I mean, it's from the narrators. The different narrators are animals. I mean, we'll talk about where the originality comes from, but I mean, do you feel like it's on the shoulders of other books or other writers, or is it?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I think a writing is a conversation in a lot of ways, like that crosses time and space and continents. And so in a lot of ways, I think I'm in conversation with the sort of traditional storytelling practices that almost every culture around the world will engage in. I think the comparison that someone made that is accurate, that I feel very like happy that someone noticed it, was the Panchatantra, which is like animal fables, sort of ancient Indian stories.
Okay.
What's interesting is I didn't set out to write stories that were responsive to that style, but that style feels very intuitive to me, like the sort of living in the fable space without necessarily being overtly a fable. So Yoko Tawada's Memoirs of a Polar Bear was absolutely a book that I thought about as I was writing. Barbara Gowdy's The White Bone, which I read afterwards, but had on my shelf waiting for me to read it. So the idea of giving voice to animals is not unique. I'm not the first person to do it. It's just, I think, perhaps a little bit less common right now. I hope it becomes more common. Watership Down, of course, I would say was a big inspiration. But the book that I want to highlight that I've continually been talking about is actually a nonfiction book, which is Amitav Ghosh's The Great Derangement, which to me was like a call to action in so many ways. And he writes towards this idea that the climate crisis is a pervasive reality of our lives. But there is a fair amount of our contemporary fiction that doesn't really acknowledge it as much as it should, or in some cases doesn't acknowledge it at all. And he was saying, as sort of the opening thesis of The Great Derangement, that we must write about it, and we should not treat it as something that is uncanny or fantastical or unlikely to happen. We should treat it as it is, which is the reality that we live with. And I had actually started writing the collection already when I read that book, and I was not really sure that people would be interested in animal narrated stories, and I wasn't sure if people would necessarily respond, but it didn't really matter in a way, because I was just writing them anyway. Like as I said earlier, I do actually really like writing, so I was writing for personal enjoyment in a large part. But when I read that book, I felt like he was speaking to me, and it felt like I don't want to say it felt like permission, but in a way it felt like permission. Like it felt like the message I understood from that book was, this is a valid and useful and important way of telling a story about the world we are collectively experiencing. And I think that so that's like such an important component of it to me, because I think that we so often, especially when we're inundated with technology and able to separate ourselves physically from natural spaces, we forget that we are natural creatures and are part of the environment. And I wanted to just ground readers back to the earth. So Great Derangement, I'm on Amitav Ghosh's shoulders for sure.
Okay. The kind of starting at the end, starting in your acknowledgments, you write about like the tame, like am I tame, am I wild, and that balance, that back and forth, the more like the spectrum, right?
Yeah.
You talked earlier about like the idea of being an observer, and obviously that's what makes you a great writer. I mean, there's so many like levels there, layers, where it's like, some of the animal narrators are observers. I mean, all of them are in some way, some more than others. We're observing. You as the writer, I mean, you don't insert yourself in the story, but I just wonder about the idea of like, I guess more about the observer part of it, especially because you're not an animal. What it means to observe, and is observation action? Is observation inaction? Is it neither of those two, I guess?
Oh, observation can be action, right? So I think there's like a passive observation where you let like the world wash over you and take it in, but don't retain it or let it slip away. And that's one way of being. And sometimes I do that. And I think the other is observation with attention, which to me feels more like a deliberate bearing witness. And I think that observation, I like it to be active. I like it to be tied into considering why something stands out to me, and considering why I feel something is important. Why is it that I want to pay attention to a particular viewpoint? So I think it can be a very active practice.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so some of the stories are about maybe not prioritized, or maybe not I guess blatant, but definitely there for sure. Obviously about climate change, about disruption of the natural environment, the old versus new, etc. Like, is this a call to action? Is this like an activist stance, or is it
Oh,
more like, hey,
yeah, no, that's a great question. I think so. I think that speaks to the question of um, when a person chooses to make their writing overtly political,
Mm,
and when they don't. And my view is that all writing is political,
mm,
because we all exist within systems of power, and sometimes politics is about navigating your place within a system of power.
mm,
And I think that yeah, I mean, yeah, this is, you could call this an activist book. You could call it a political book. It's certainly not a benign set of stories. I
sure.
don't I do have a point, right? And there's something I want readers to glean from it. But I think when we ask the question of like, when is writing identified as political and when it is not, we also have to ask the question of, when is it that a person is able to choose to describe their work as apolitical? Because I think
Hmm.
even when a writer describes their work as apolitical, it probably isn't.
Hmm.
They just may be in a position where they have the ability to describe it that way because it
Right.
doesn't necessarily feel political to them, but it'll be political to some reader somewhere.
Hmm.
So yeah, I mean, I did make an overt choice. I did. And I think that when I was first writing some of the earlier stories in the collection, I don't know that was a very popular choice.
Hmm.
But I think it's becoming more prevalent now. There are a lot of exciting writers today that are um, they're overtly acknowledging like some of the things that they want to cultivate in their work,
Hmm.
and I think that's kind of exciting,
Definitely.
or it can be exciting.
Right. You
Sort of
you
depends.
yeah, right. Some of the greatness of the book is that you, I guess by definition you do anthropomorphize. I'm excited for myself just being able to pronounce that word.
Yeah,
But not in a cheesy way. You know, it's done so well that these are not exact carbon copies of human beings, right? So I
right.
wonder how you created characters who are animals, but they're not humans, yet we read them, they talk, they
Yeah,
communicate, they have feelings, they're not sentient beings.
yeah. So that was kind of tricky, because I think I'm asking readers to accept that I'm asking them to accept that an animal can tell a story, which is the first
Sure,
trust step.
sure.
That's the first thing I'm asking them to do. And so once they're willing to kind of take that leap with me, that the animal will tell the story, I do feel that I owe the reader some reality to kind of ground the animal in true science. So I did a lot of research in terms of animal behavior, animal perception. For example, in The Hunted, the Haunted, the Hungry, the Tame, I made sure that the dog's visual cues were consistent with what colors dogs could actually see.
Hmm.
For the level of tolerance, I did a lot of research to make sure the seasons were consistently and accurately portrayed. So I did a lot of layperson's research on animal
Hmm.
behavior, animal habitats, um, environments, just to make sure that I was putting something fantastical inside a framework of reality.
Hmm.
And um, so that was part one. And I think that once I developed a foundation of research for animal behavior, that can help develop the personalities, because
Sure.
their senses and how they react to the things around them can help shape, those behaviors can help shape a character. There's also a lot of me in there. I think
Hmm.
every writer to a certain extent will infuse some of their own self into their work. I think that people are less likely to assume that with these stories, because they will, oh, this is a wolf, it's,
Hmm.
but a lot of my own, emotions and personal characteristics are are infused in there too.
Is there any of the toy man in you, or vice versa?
No, it's interesting. That's interesting. Toy Man was actually inspired by a real person. I saw a TED talk by this wonderful, I think he's an engineer in India, and he decided to just use his expertise to make toys out of found objects for kids, and then to create these workshops so they can make their own toys. So
Cool.
that character was insane. That particular person, actually, I think I have his name in the back of my. Just
Yeah,
check
shout him
really
out.
quick. Yeah, it's let me find the page. Oh my gosh. Yeah, Arvind Gupta. And there's a TED talk called Turning Trash into Toys for Learning. It's wonderful. And he kind of talks about his practice of using just discarded items like straws and string and paper clips and things like that to make kinetic toys that can like do really cool things. And I thought that was a really wonderful. I thought that was a wonderful thing.
Definitely. I mean, from the very beginning, the first story is called The Good Donkey. And, even at the end, you have a reference page. This, not a lot of fiction books have reference pages, right? I mean, these are, most if not all the stories are based on, real life, and maybe some more loosely than others, right?
Yeah.
So in The Good Donkey, we have Hafiz, am I saying the name correctly?
Yeah.
Right. So he's putting together a zoo, and this is in Gaza, right?
Yeah.
Gaza Strip, Palestine. And, they're obviously, there are airstrikes that at times take out parts of the zoo. We have, starts off with the donkey who's telling the story, and he's being painted, to look like a zebra.
Yeah.
And I think if, at first I'm thinking like, it's like a scam artist kind of thing, like Hafiz is like a scam artist, but he's doing it to put together a zoo, where we do have a zebra, excuse me, for in a place that's often, there's so much collateral damage, obviously human beings, but just those things that make people happy, zoos and stuff like that. I wonder about the background and how you got, how you were interested in that story.